A primary school on Sydney's North Shore is under fire after it displayed student-made posters saying "Stop Killer Cops" and "White Lives Matter too much." New South Wales Education Minister has called for an investigation into how the posters, which were created by Year 5 and 6 students, came to be displayed, promising disciplinary action against teachers found to be politicising the classroom. For more on this and some much-needed common sense, I'm joined from Sydney by the leader of One Nation in New South Wales, Mark Latham. Thank you for your time. How on earth was this allowed to happen in a government-run school?
Well, too many schools in our state, Rita, have been overrun by politics and woke ideology. This was part of a Black Lives Matter set of lessons, posters all over the classroom. The offensive one we're talking about was part of a whole BLM exercise inside the classroom. Now, you and I know that's, you go to their website, it's neo-Marxism, it's gender fluidity, it's attacks on the nuclear family, but Black Lives Matter was glorified, and as part of that, 2 students have been allowed to write on the poster, "Pigs out of the country," and another student, just as bad, has been able to write "White Lives Matter too much." And the classroom teacher, whoever was in charge, has not corrected that work, and in fact seemingly has felt so good and proud about it, it's been hung from the ceiling as a poster in the classroom for everyone to look at and everyone absorb. This is a sickness, a political sickness in our schools that's got to be eradicated.
Now, what are the chances that the teachers at that school would have told the kids, if they're going to undertake this exercise and look at BLM, that the co-founders identify as neo-Marxists, that they're proudly anti-capitalist, anti-police, and actually be honest about the ideology of this group rather than paint them as just saviours for equality and fighting against oppression? I mean, where is the balance in exposing children to a group like BLM?
Well, there's no chance that the teachers said that to the 11 and 12-year-olds. This is a primary school class, years 5 and 6. And it's an attack on the New South Wales Police. I find it sickening that we'd have any students in the system saying "pigs out of the country." And it's just a sign of how these experimental schools, Linfield is an experimental school. There are no subjects, no exams. All the work is self-assessed by the students. It's some sort of commune arrangement. They've got gender-neutral toilets for primary students. There's rainbow flags everywhere, of course. It's wokeism on steroids. So out of that environment, it's more like some political indoctrination camp instead of a regular school teaching literacy, numeracy, English, science, geography and history. So that's the shame of these experimental schools. We know what works in the classroom, direct instruction by teachers, other teaching and curriculum methods. These experimental schools always fail, and in this instance they've failed hopelessly because of the political content articulated by these 11 and 12-year-olds are just simply appalling. This is a school that's breeding hatreds, disrespect and barbarism.
And imagine if a child there happened to have a parent or a family member who was in law enforcement and they're seeing these sorts of anti-police messages in the classroom. It's not very inclusive, is it? Now, I want to go to another issue. This time you're under attack, Mark Latham. A public hearing at New South Wales Parliament has been thrown into chaos after members of a transgender support group, they call themselves the Community Action for Rainbow Rights, came and objected to discussion of One Nation's bill to ban promotion of concepts such as gender fluidity in classrooms. Let's have a look at what happened.
How dare you sit there and try to oversee the rolling back of our rights, rolling them back by decades, trying to attack the most vulnerable people in our society, transgender young people who've already got it tough enough. You are nothing but a thug and a bigot who doesn't represent anyone but yourself, a tiny minority of bigots in this society. The vast majority of people want our schools to be inclusive spaces. You are not going to get away with this. This bill is not going to pass. You are dreaming. If you think you can attack the rights of teachers, if you think you can attack counsellors, if you think you can attack trans youth,
Mark, you're being called a thug and a bigot and told you're the minority, not the trans activist. What's your response to all that?
Oh, well, it's no different to Twitter, is it, Rita? Full-on abuse. That's the face of left-wing respect and tolerance, interrupting a democratic forum to consider a bill, look at ways of amending it, improving it, do things in the public interest. A lot of parents, quite rightly in New South Wales, very concerned about the teaching of gender fluidity, the teaching of gender as a social construct in our schools. I receive a lot of complaints. I've acted on a bill that also says parents have got rights. It's a Parental Rights Bill to say that parents are the primary educators of their children and they've got rights on matters of social, ethical, moral teaching inside schools. They need to be consulted is one of the provisions in the bill. So, those sort of protesters don't do their own cause any good, and it was a pretty sad reflection on their level of abuse. I didn't actually hear too much of what they were saying, but it wasn't very complimentary, was it?
No, but explain to us what the bill is likely to achieve, and has it got any chance to actually get through?
Well, we've got the conclusion of our 2 days of hearings just moments ago, and the bill is now subject of a committee report, and I'm hoping the committee would find that parental rights are important, that parental rights should be legislated according to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, that parental rights are a basic human right, that parents should be consulted at the beginning of every school year as to what's coming up in the classroom, so no surprises in that regard, and areas where parents are not comfortable with the teaching, it doesn't accord with their family values, they would have a legal right to take their children out of that classroom. And on top of that, gender should not be taught as a social construct. So I think all those things are fair and reasonable. If I can get the majority of those items up in the committee report and through the Berejiklian cabinet table, that would be pretty good work on behalf of the parents of New South Wales who are neglected. The Teachers Federation in one of their webinars said, if you find out anything about the sexuality and gender of a student, don't tell the parents. All parents, because they say, it's dangerous at home.
Gosh.
So parental rights are being wiped. We've got to legislate them.
Oh, yes. Let's move on to another issue, though. Our favourites, Malcolm Turnbull and Kevin Rudd, they've joined forces and penned a column for who else but The Guardian. Fresh from their appearances in front of a Senate inquiry into media diversity, the former Prime Ministers used the piece to resume their attack and air even more of their paranoid conspiracy theories about the Murdoch media. Mark, according to Rudd and Turnbull, the main thing holding back Australia's climate ambition is politics. And I quote, a toxic coalition of the Murdoch press, the right wing of the Liberal and National parties, and vested interests in the fossil fuel sector. Your response, Mark? It seems to me these two don't have much respect for the majority opinion of Australian voters.
Yeah, well, Malcolm Turnbull said there's 110,000 coal-reliant jobs in the Hunter Valley, and he wants them all gone with no job replacement strategy. His vision for the Hunter Valley is one long Centrelink line, and this is a dreadful point of view. Both Rudd and Turnbull are very wealthy individuals with water views, no regard for blue-collar workers, and no regard for the reality that China will continue to industrialise, to use our coal, their own coal, to build steel, to create coal-fired electricity, and their outputs of emissions and coal are 20 to 25 times what we do in Australia in both thermal and coking coal.